everyone. So yeah, thanks for coming out. I am a traveling filmmaker. I'm a nomad, and this is going to be all about how to sort of improvise the kinds of films that I do. So first of all, yeah, who am I? This is a few of the videos that I've done for as personal projects. They're on Vimeo. Hong Kong Strong, Nomads Mongolia, Tokyo Roar, Balinese, Dreamwalking Barcelona, Gateway of the Ganges, and The Shipping Yard are all videos I've done over the last 4 or 5 years that have gotten staff picked by Vimeo. So I started in reality TV. That was my first gig out of film school. And I sort of segued from that into doing these travel films and also directing commercials for the web, you know, as the sort of for-profit side of the filmmaking. But all of these videos here were done independently, not for any client, not for, you know, profit of any kind. And here's just a nice little photo album of shooting stuff around the world with friends. So yeah, I'll just talk for a minute about the reality TV thing, because it's pretty important as a building block, I think, of learning how to improvise when you're a filmmaker. You know, reality TV gets a bad rap, rightfully so. I'm not a huge fan of it personally. But I happened to work on one of the reality shows that I have some respect for, which was a show called True Life on MTV. And it was on for about a decade. I started off as a freelance shooter. I did some editing too, and they eventually moved me up to be a producer. And if you're a producer on this show, where the concept is, it's a follow doc. So it's a show where they say, okay, you're going to film this person's life. They have this weird problem. Let's say they have narcolepsy, or they have, like, I don't know, you know, they eat like stuff that isn't food. They have problems with their mom. There's one specific problem. You're going to make basically an hour-long reality show style documentary about that person and that problem by essentially living with them for a few weeks at a time, filming their life, and then distilling, you know, 90 hours of footage into this 1-hour program. And I did all that pretty much solo. So it was an assignment of, you know, sort of like being a journalistic stringer, where they tell me what to, you know, they tell me a basic topic, I go out, I shoot, and I edit, and then I turn it into the network, MTV, and they give me notes, and like, that's the workflow. Basically, there's no other crew, there was no one out there to help me. I got the releases, I, you know, did the editing myself. I even put in some of my own hip-hop beats that I made in college into the soundtrack of some of these reality shows. Just because I could, because they were on my computer, and why not? So the process of that was very like contained, you know. It was just me relying on myself to go shoot this thing that really had no structure, and there was no guarantee of any sort of a storyline to even happen when I went out and shot, because I was just following people and filming their lives. So the whole thing was improvising a way to create a cohesive, very strictly formatted show out of a completely unformatted topic with no oversight and no like crew support for me. There was no, you know, story editor on site with me helping me out. There was no field producer. There's nobody recording sound for me even. And I did that for about 8.5 years, I think. And then finally I decided I wanted to sort of segue into something else. And I got an opportunity to do some work out in Dubai, doing like web promotional videos and product showcases for Etihad Airways, which is they're the official airline of Abu Dhabi, and they needed basically a slate of videos, and a friend of mine wanted to give me a shot directing those, and that's how I got my start traveling and shooting around the world. So from then on, I was doing mostly just, you know, little short things for the web, and in between those gigs, I would go off and travel somewhere else on my own, and I just decided, hey, you know, I'm traveling so much, why do I need to have a home base? So I subletted my place in LA, and after that lease ran out, I just didn't renew it, and that was 4 years ago. Yeah, almost exactly 4 years ago now. It was November of whatever 4 years ago was when I first started traveling. Yeah, 2012, I think. Yeah, so what is improvisational filmmaking? Well, improvisational filmmaking to me is creating a film out of the unexpected and using that unexpected stuff to fuel the creativity. Like, it's part of the plan to have stuff go not the way you planned. So, for instance, the footage the stills I'm showing you here are from a video I did called Hong Kong Strong. And this was supposed to be me filming a calm day of sailing, and it turned into like a windy day that was thunderstorming in parts, and then also just gusting and huge waves. And it turned into like this crazy, completely the opposite of what I expected scene. But I was ready to shoot something that wasn't what I expected, and I ended up using this footage in the final product. But that's why I included that here. And basically what I do, plan what I can, improvise what I can't, and be ready for the things that I can't plan. For instance, this is the first incense ceremony in the Wan Tai Sin temple in Hong Kong. And to give you an idea of what that was, I'll play just a little bit of Hong Kong Strong, and I'm going to guess as to exactly where it is. Perfect volume. Sorry to anybody's ears. So this is the scene. Just skip to the meat here. Oh yeah, there's the sailing. This is something else. Okay, so that's the incense ceremony. So while this plays, I'll talk through it. I'm cross-cutting with other stuff, but we're focusing now on the incense ceremony. Some of it's planned, some of it's improvised. I knew this would happen. This is an annual ritual they do where people basically race to place their incense in the shrine at this temple. I didn't know exactly what their trajectory was going to be or what the layout was going to be inside the temple because it changes every year due to different regulations. So basically, we sort of covered it like a live sporting event of sorts. There were 3 cameras on the ground, 1 in the air. I was one of the cameras, and then we had a person who's sort of acting as a fixer, who was liaising with the representative of the temple. So to capture this sort of chaotic event, okay, and I'll pause it there. So to capture the sort of crazy event that you saw there, we did a lot of planning, but then we also reacted in the moment when things didn't go the way that we expected them to go. So with that, the goal there was create a seamless film with both the improvised and the planned events. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so just to really quickly recap sort of what I meant with what I was talking about with that festival, or at the ceremony, I knew people were going to run in the temple and try to put the incense in the shrine. What I didn't know was that the police had changed the regulations of where they would start running from and at what point, at what time they would start running. It turns out because people have gotten trampled doing this in years past when it was just a free-for-all, because they used to run from the very entrance of the temple, which is way, way far away. Because people got trampled doing that, the police created this long serpentine path like you have when you're waiting to check in an airport or something, that kind of thing leading up to almost the very front, and then they would release people in segments to go put their incense in the shrine. But because they wanted to preserve the integrity of the event, everybody knew that that segmented release would stop at a certain time, and then there'd be a true free-for-all at exactly 11 p.m. where whoever had waited until that point to run up would get their chance. And all this we sort of discovered that night as it was going on. So we had people stationed at the front of the temple initially to try to catch that moment. That didn't work out. They're like, all right, we can't shoot from here. It was too crowded and too difficult to get some of them to the ideal spot. But I was waiting behind this. There's like a thing where they all stick their incense. So I was waiting behind that thing because I knew no matter where they ran from, they were going to run to me. And I trusted my camera above all the other cameras. So there were 2 or 3 satellites at any given time, satellite cameras going around the temple, trying to catch the point from which they would run. But I knew even if all that failed, at least I could capture the event from where I was stationed. And that's sort of, the planning as much as we could, and then improvising because we had to, because we didn't know that the regulations had changed just that year for that event. And then I had a drone which was supposed to be capturing a top-down shot of everybody putting their incense into the shrine, and I thought I was going to get this really cool sort of shot of a line of people, running, and everything was completely different, and I got this shot instead where you can't really tell what's going on. So instead of using it as part of the action portion of the sequence where everyone's running, I used this just as an establishing shot at the beginning to let you know what the temple looks like from the air. So repurposed the shot. That wasn't how I intended to use it, but it works okay in the edit. Okay, so yeah, goal here, create a seamless film with both improvised and planned events. In this still frame here, this is from a short film I did in Mongolia with the Kazakh nomads that live out there. This calf was being pulled, or was pulling a kid who was trying to stop him, and I had about 30 seconds to react to that and run out there and shoot that shot. And if I can find that little thing, I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. So yeah, these eagle hunters. Okay, here we go. This is me running with a GoPro on a Feiyu 3 gimbal, desperately trying to keep this kid and the calf in frame and make some usable scene out of it. And I got it. And I used it in the film, intercutting it with other footage that was shot for a completely different purpose. And I had no plan to incorporate that into my video at all. Initially, I didn't know that was going to happen. But what I did know is that before I even went to Mongolia, I knew I needed 3 or 4 different types of things happening. I knew I was going to film these Kazakh eagle hunters who use eagles to hunt small game. I knew I was going to film some people that herd camels, and I wanted a couple other things that I didn't know quite what they were, but I knew the type of thing. So when I saw these kids, way far away, trying to catch this yak that had started to run away, I was like, oh, okay, that's the other scene that I need. That's the energy that I need. So I just grabbed the GoPro because it would have taken too long to balance the full-size gimbal, and that camera it wasn't ready to go. I grabbed the GoPro, which was ready because that was the go-to thing. If I have no other camera, I've got a GoPro just sitting there. It takes no time to balance. You hit one button, it's recording, and I ran as fast as I could to catch up to the kids, and I caught that little scene that I just showed you. So that was just a grab, but it integrates pretty seamlessly with the footage that was more planned, because I pre-planned the rig. I knew that, okay, a GoPro is not going to look as good all the time, but for a few shots here and there, if it's on a gimbal, if it's stabilized, I can run with it and get some shots that are going to look smooth and integrate with the other shots that are done with the A camera. So that's the unplanned element. Planned element of this film, stuff like this. Guy holding an eagle up, I can get a shot of that. I can spend 10 minutes getting that shot perfect. So the goal though was to make it so that it was seamless. So that's the thing I'm kind of trying to talk about here. It's not just how to run and gun shoot, how to make a film where it looks purely improvised and it feels purely improvised. I want the audience to not know what was improvised and what was planned, and have the whole film feel preconceived almost, like it just happened to magically come together with this essence of spontaneity still intact. So I'm going to go into gear here. Gear acquisition syndrome. We probably all have flirted with it at least. I love cameras. We all love cameras. People tend to wait for cameras though, or they tend to test their cameras to death or constantly worry if they should upgrade before they shoot. And this is the antithesis of improvisation if you're constantly trying to upgrade. And I don't want to stay on a soapbox for too long about, about gear, but just there is no perfect camera. And one thing to keep in mind, while you're picking your camera, somebody else is out shooting with theirs and getting a shot. Somebody in the world right now, every moment you spend browsing a catalog or reading a review, somebody else is getting a shot that you're not getting. And I try to shoot something every day if possible with literally whatever I have on hand. If it's a phone, I've used a phone a few times, not too much, but more commonly like an RX100, I have the little pocket camera. I'll use that to shoot, or I will use anything in my kit with whatever lens is handy. So I consider it like a sport. I've never been really into sports. I've never played a lot of team sports or spent a lot of time doing that. So in lieu of that, I've sort of made it a practice ever since I was a kid to go out and shoot on the weekends or shoot, after school I would shoot, or during film school we'd sit through movies all day, and then when the movies were done I was like, oh my god, I can't watch another movie, I have to actually go shoot something. So then I went and I would shoot at night. Could shoot a street lamp or try to figure out an interesting way to cut together shots of me washing my own hands or just anything to get something on film and to feel like I'm creating every day and getting to know my gear, getting to know myself a little bit better. So I don't view filmmaking as something you do when you get the green light and when you have a shoot planned with a schedule. I consider that that's like the icing. That's the game. That's the game time or whatever. The majority of my filmmaking is done like yesterday, because I'm jet lagged, I got up at 4 in the morning, and I was like, okay, I can't sleep, I'm gonna go shoot sunrise. So I just walked around and filmed as the sun went up. And I got some okay shots, nothing great, but it's good to just keep in practice. Okay, so that said, I'm gonna talk about gear, so you know what I use. I apologize for the size of this font. There was no way to make a list bigger with this program. Cameras, I have a Sony a7S II, Sony a6300, Sony RX10 II, Sony RX10V5, it's the new one, GoPro Hero 4 Black, GoPro Session. These are roughly in order of how often I use the cameras also. The a7S II would be the A camera, I suppose. The a6300 stays 100% of the time on a gimbal. I never use this thing handheld. I'll talk about the gimbal in a second. The RX10 I use mostly for telephoto shots that have to be in slow motion. It's really specific. But if I want to do 120p and I want to be able to zoom in, long distance subjects, stuff like sports, stuff like live events, if I'm in a big public place and I can't get close to somebody and there's some cool ceremony going on or some festival and people are dancing around in costumes and I want to shoot that in slow motion, rather than try to do that with the a7S II or the a6300 and have to slap on a big telephoto lens, I just treat the RX10 like it is a telephoto lens. Instead of switching lenses, I go to that, okay, this is my telephoto lens for 120p in crystal clear 1080p resolution. And then, I use GoPros like everybody else uses GoPros, just for POV shots, crash cam stuff. And very occasionally when I'm desperate, I'll put it on a gimbal and actually run around with that as an A camera if I don't want to risk another camera, like in Mongolia. I just knew there would be times when I didn't want to risk the other camera on the gimbal. So GoPro on the gimbal together is like a $700 package. I can deal with losing that a lot more than losing an a7S II on another gimbal. So those are the cameras. These are the lenses. There's a bunch of them. I don't use these all the time. So I'll just say what these are real quick. The Sony E-mount 10-18mm. This is APS-C wide for the Sony a6300 camera and other APS-C cameras. Full frame equivalent, Sony FE 16-35mm. 28mm f2. This is a prime lens. It's lovely because it's just so small. Where is it? This one. It's an f2 full frame semi-wide lens. Super tiny for what you get there. It's great. 35mm f1.8. This is also super tiny. This is for APS-C only, so it's more like a 50 in full frame equivalent. terms, but it's got stabilization, and it's it's very convenient. Yeah, the Rokinon 35 f1.4 did not bring that. It's a big cinema lens. It's about this long. I don't use it that much purely because of its size, but it has a nice like analog. It's got that street photographer 35 millimeter look to it, and it's absolutely gorgeous looking to me. But I've noticed that it doesn't resolve 4K if you go to f1.4. It's actually a 1080p image if you zoom in. Like if you go from 1080p to 4K and then you zoom in, you actually don't get more detail if you're wide open on that 35, because the optics just aren't precise enough. Nikon 50mm 1.4 AIS is an old manual lens. Everybody or their parent probably has something like this lying around. It's great just because, I've just had this forever, and it's got character to it, and I've been too cheap to buy one of the Carl Zeiss or the Sony ones to replace it. Though it would be nice to have autofocus sometimes. I have the Sony E-mount 50. This is another cheap light lens for APS-C only. 85mm f1.4 Rokinon. Again, I don't have that with me, but that's another one. I don't use it very much, but it's just all manual, pretty cheap. It's like $300, I think. And if you want a full frame 85 f1.4, they're not going to come a lot cheaper than that. Just gives you a nice, really soft background for portraits and stuff. And then the zoom lenses, the FE 24 to 240mm. I try not to use that too much just because it's so heavy, but that's kind of an all-arounder, full frame. Will cover any practical focal length lens. And then the 18 to 105, which is something I just got recently, and it's really great on a gimbal because you can zoom in and you can zoom out, and the lens doesn't get any longer or shorter. And it covers most of the usable focal lengths for APS-C, not full frame. And the good thing is, because it doesn't, the size of the lens doesn't change as you zoom, it doesn't throw your gimbal off balance. So you don't have to stop and rebalance your gimbal. So you can do anything from like a 26, something like that, full frame equivalent, like sort of wide, to 150 full frame equivalent telephoto shot on a gimbal without changing lenses. Granted, it's f4, so it's not the best in low light, but it's okay. And if you're shooting in the daytime and you want to just get a wide variety of focal lengths, you can just leave that on your camera and walk around with the gimbal, and it's a lot of fun because you're not constrained to just shooting ultra wide or just shooting like one focal length on a prime. And then the kit, the Sony E-mount 1650mm. Don't use it very much, but comes with the camera, so I have it. Okay, the gimbal, in case you're curious what that thing is, it's called a Zhiyun crane. No idea why it's called a crane, but it's a Chinese company that makes this thing. It's not a crane, it's a gimbal. And just to show you what this is, if you're unfamiliar with 3-axis gimbals, it's like, the chicken head thing. So this will keep my camera steady. When I'm walking, when I'm running, I can get high shots, I can get low shots. Oops, that was sloppy. No harm, no foul. That actually doesn't damage the gimbal if you bang it like that, thankfully. Yeah. So yeah, this will, it will follow what you do if you click the button on the back to make it do that, or you can have it just not follow your tilt, or you can have it not follow anything you do. And this is nice if, for instance, you're walking and you want to just go straight toward an object, like maybe you're shooting a hyperlapse and you know you're going to wiggle around a bit as you walk and you don't want it to influence your shot, then you can lock off everything. So I use this gimbal for almost everything I shoot now. I've gotten addicted to it. I probably should try to wean myself off of it and not use it for everything, but it's just so handy because you can get, like most of the shots that I would dream about shooting when I was out traveling before, I'm like, oh, I'm walking by this building and I want to get that perspective, that parallax as I walk. Well, I used to be able to only kind of do that, and then that's the extent of what I could do. Now with this gimbal, I can just keep walking and go around the building and get that beautiful, rotating, tilted shot of the building, and it's perfectly smooth, and I can, get that. And this factors into improvisation because then I don't have to worry about planning my shots in advance so much, because, if I wanted to do this before the era of gimbals, or, I guess glide cams, they sort of fulfilled this function, but they weren't as, like the glide cam was always touchy. It was always, losing the axis or falling off balance, or It's like, and you had to counterweight it, it was heavier. So, to get those really smooth gliding shots, people would use either the big Steadicam or dollies, and neither of those can be used without some pre-planning. You can't put a Steadicam in a backpack. You can't put a dolly in a backpack. Actually, you can't even fit a glide cam in this backpack. So this backpackableness of this makes it so much more conducive to improvisational filmmaking for me. I can have like a small backpack that just carries this stuff that doesn't hurt my back to walk around with all day, if I'm walking through a city. And if I decide to just get some B-roll that's not part of my official project, but I'm eating lunch and I've got my backpack there, within 30 seconds I'm rolling, and I can get anything from a jib shot to a dolly shot to like a little slider shot, and I have a wide variety of lenses, and the lenses are small, so I don't have to consider leaving any of these at home to save weight, really, because they're not huge, they're not heavy, and I don't need a follow focus for most things because the A6300 has really good autofocus, especially if you're shooting a person, especially if their face is toward you. So, that frees me from having to have a second person to pull focus or have extra gear, on the rig itself to follow focus. So, gimbal, very useful. Notice that they state 1,200 gram limit. You can actually take it up to about 1,600. What that means is if it's anything larger than something like the A7S II with the 16 to 35, if your camera is bigger than that and your lens is bigger, you probably can't use this gimbal, just so you know. So yeah, that's a practical limit. Okay, so now I have gear, what do I shoot? Well, I always try to shoot something that gives potential for improvisation. So what is that? Most simply put, it's a moving subject. It's a subject that has some unpredictability itself. Like these are lion dancers in Hong Kong. What I'm filming here is a rehearsal where they're preparing for the Chinese New Year celebration. And you'll notice I'm not on the ground. I'm up in an elevated position on some thing I found that would support my weight. And also that's my producer, Ansley, next to me getting a second angle as I'm shooting. So these guys were improvising with their practice. They have a set routine that they're practicing, but the way they do it changes every time they practice. The location of the practice changed. I filmed them 2 times, and I didn't know what I was getting into. They just said, we're going to be in this address. So, I showed up. I knew the subject was going to be cool. I didn't know anything about the surrounding circumstances of what I was filming. I didn't know the lighting. I didn't know the routine. I didn't know what angles I was going to be able to get. But I knew that any angle of guys jumping around in a lion costume on these things is going to be pretty cool. So that's the starting point. And that frees me to improvise the rest because I know that I've got a subject that has some unpredictable elements, but they're all cool and it's worth shooting. And also unusual angles. So the angle I'm getting here is not the easiest angle. And I got a bunch of other angles that were easier. But the thing about unusual angles, uncomfortable angles, is if you're physically uncomfortable doing it, it probably means that your audience will have seen the angle a few less times. Because, sitting back with a telephoto lens and zooming in on these guys and getting a nice pre-focused shot in slow motion of their legs landing, that's a very comfortable, relatively easy shot to get that everybody's shooting. So the shot that's not comfortable, that's harder to get, is probably the shot that's going to make the audience stay a little bit more interested, because on the subconscious level, they'll just be like, oh, I haven't seen that angle of that. Okay, that's cool. And they may not think, wow, it's crazy. I can't believe this person went to the extreme lengths to get the shot. But they will they'll just kind of notice that the shot seems a little more intense or feels a little newer. So that's the adage of, if you're uncomfortable, you might be doing it right with the angles. Yeah, most of all, keep yourself excited about what you're shooting, because if you're not excited, then you're not going to want to improvise. I'm not an actor. I've never taken a class in improv, but I assume it's exactly the same thing for improvisational acting. If you're trying to improvise about something that you find boring, probably your brain isn't going to be firing off with all these crazy, awesome ideas, as well or as it would be if you were actually passionate about the thing that you're, acting, or the thing you're shooting, or anything. So yeah, I always try to make sure that when I'm improvising a film, the film itself, the subject itself, and the shot itself are things that actually get me excited. So this is the concept. It's a palette. It's like, you know the colors you need to paint with or something. I'm trying to think of a better analogy than that. But I know the emotional arc I want the film to have, basically. And you can even think of it like in terms of speed of the shots. You need slow, medium, fast for every film. And hopefully some ultra, ultra fast stuff. The thing is, when you're traveling, it's really easy to get the slow stuff. In buildings, people walking down the street shots. That stuff's easy. So that tends to be, the 80-20 problem that exists in a lot of different industries. Well, in this, little travel filmmaking subgenre, the 80 is gonna be street shots of stuff moving slowly from far away. So that's part of the palette, but it's a very small part. So I know that's just one color of the palette. So then I need medium speed stuff. That would be somebody maybe praying at a temple, or somebody serving food or eating food. Anything like that, that literally the speed of the shot, the speed of their movement is medium. But then I always need fast stuff. And that's the hardest to get, because most places you go when you travel, most subjects you film, like people just aren't going full tilt most of the time in regular life. So when I'm researching what I want to shoot, I start with that. I start with what's the crazy thing that's going to happen that's going to keep people super glued when they watch this. And I make sure I have that thing. I get permission to shoot that thing. I organize logistics around that thing. And then the slow and the medium stuff gets built around it. Like Hong Kong Strong, like the first incense ceremony I was talking about, that's the fast. We spent close to a month arranging to shoot that. Getting permission, getting extra cameras, arranging with the drone, looking at layouts of the temple, which were ultimately fairly useless because everything changed, but we organized the hell out of that because I knew I needed that fast. And then the slow stuff, a lot of it was much easier to get, like just, walking around getting shots of buildings. Yes?
Can you show that scene real quick?
The temple scene?
Yeah, what you just talked about?
Yeah. It's the one I showed earlier.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I'll just show a bit of it here again. So it's cross-cut with other stuff. The line dancers, also fast. Also, we spent a while planning to shoot both rehearsal and performance with them to make sure that, okay, so this is the temple. I'll just let you watch the scene. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of that little sequence, but yeah. So what you're watching in that sequence is, if you want to break it down to the most basic level, it's a bunch of fast stuff happening. And what I see in a lot of people's films, specifically like travel films that they shoot, on vacation and stuff, they'll take like I saw a video about Cuba a little while ago where the guy went to Cuba and filmed like cars just sitting there. They're cool cars, but he filmed like just a shot, like the camera's drifting a little bit, but it's just a shot of a car sitting there, and then a horse not moving, and then a person smoking a cigar not moving, and the camera's not really moving either. And then he threw in these like, Delisandre like transitions, boom, 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 like between all these things, with this music that was super hyped up and super cinematically, like, climax of like the next like Avengers trailer music. And it was completely incongruous because the shots weren't fast, but the music was fast and the edits were fast. And I feel like a lot of people in that little, genre of like travel videos now, they try to add energy through just the transitions, But if you're not filming anything or anything's happening, and you just try to use the transitions to make it exciting, it's going to come up a little empty most of the time. Your audience will catch on after a few cuts that there's nothing really going on in the scene. So I try to fill the scenes with the actual content of motion, and there's no transitions in this whole sequence. People ask me a lot about my transitions, and how do you do those transitions? Well, in most of what I do, it's just cuts, cut, cut, cut. And that's actually a cut. It looks like a transition, but that's a moment where I drop the camera and I just use that blur.
Are you doing a lot of sound design? When
Yeah.
you do your edit, it sounds like there's a lot of layers of sound actually happening too.
Yeah, I rebuild all the sound in post.
You do that?
Yeah, it's all Foley. Yeah. I use a little bit of the in-camera sound.
Yeah.
Like the sounds of the crowds and stuff. It's people shouting in Cantonese about incense, so there's no way I'm going to find that in like a sound effects library. But if it's something that's a little bit more generic, then I'll pull it from a sound effects library because it sounds better. If it's just waves tend to sound the same.
Yeah.
If it's a lion roaring, I'm not going to go find a lion. I have lion roaring sound effects over this lion, which it's not a real lion, so I couldn't record those on site. But it adds drama to that moment. There. And you just, maybe it registers consciously, maybe not, but it's a matter of trying to fill the scene so that there's no dead moments sonically, so that it doesn't feel like I'm leaning on the music to do all the work for me.
You're doing all that.
Yeah.
Brandon,
Yes.
I have a question from Twitter for you.
Sure.
This is from Albert Marugi, and it's, what % of the time do people tell you they don't want to be filmed?
In Hong Kong? Okay. Well, first of all, it's very culturally dependent. In Bali, it was about 2%. In Hong Kong, it was about 98%. It's very cultural, and it's different everywhere you go. With like Hong Kong, this was so hard to make, and people tend to not make videos about the culture of Hong Kong because people are very wary of strangers there, especially strangers with cameras. I had people straight up ask me, "Are you from the government?" when I was shooting. Like I was just filming some like laundry on a line in this neighborhood out in the New Territories, just laundry waving in the wind. This guy comes up to me and is like, "Excuse me, are you from the housing authority?" Like he spoke perfect English. He had like a California accent. He's like, "Yeah, I live out here." Chinese guy. I live out here, friend. You're welcome to come take a look, friend, but put the camera down. You can't film here because I can't know that you're not trying to expose us for violating some sort of a housing regulation. Yeah. So a lot of it's about the approach, though, like what I described with the guy in Bali. So Balinese people wouldn't tell me no, but it was also because I don't just film them, I don't just run up with the camera in their face and sit there for like 3 minutes trying to get my settings right, like while I'm focused on them, like, hoping that they don't get freaked out and hoping I get my shot. What I do is, if I'm trying to film somebody, first of all, I notice them out of the corner of my eye. Let's say the person's, sitting over there, and I'm over here. I'm not looking at them, but I'm getting my camera set. I'm testing the balance on my gimbal, and then I get the gimbal going, and then, I'm ready. Just double check it, film something else. Picture. I pre-visualize my focal length. Okay, I want to be at about 35 for that person, and then I just sort of wait. Okay, this person's like, I don't know, they're going to feed some ducks. I see them tearing the bread, but I don't need shots of them tearing bread. I need them actually throwing the bread at the ducks. So then I wait until they're feeding the ducks. I'm like, okay, oh, now their kid is distracting them and they're having fun. Okay, and I just go in like this, and I just go like that, and they look at me and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Is this okay? It's okay. No? Okay, cool. And then I walk away. Or they say, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, oh, it's okay? Okay. Then I stay there, and I film all the shots I can possibly film, and I start filming them from the side, because that freaks people less out if you're filming them from the side. And then I move to the front shots, which you even saw like with the guy with the coconuts in Bali. I wasn't filming his face at first. I waited until the end for the portrait because I had more intimacy with him, and I felt like I would get a more natural pose. He wouldn't, he was holding the coconuts like this, whereas if I had filmed him at the very beginning with the coconuts, he may have done it like this, or he may have done it like this, or he may have been like that. But the dude was tired. He wanted to go home. He was used to me. He was just like, screw it. Yeah, this is me and coconuts. And I was like, okay, that's what I want. I want the vibe of the way you were actually feeling. So to break that down in steps, it's get your camera set up while you look at them out of the corner of your eye, and then wait for whatever action you're trying to film to be sort of in full swing so that they're distracted. Then try to grab a shot, of the stranger, and don't get too close, like whatever your comfort sphere would be with the stranger, stay outside of that at first. If they notice you, when they notice you, just smile, like be friendly, ask if this is okay. If they get really freaked out, be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just a tourist, I'm, sorry if I won't use this, I'll delete it. Sometimes I've actually deleted the shot in front of people just to show them, like I'm not gonna use it. But if they're amenable to it, then push it, like go as far as you can, getting intimate with the subject, getting your close-ups, getting shots of their kids, following their kid when they run around, it's chase the ducks. After they leave, film some more shots of just ducks running around, get a nice beauty shot of the ducks like launching into the sky and film it in slow motion, get everything to surround the content that you can so that you fully shot out your subject and you've got all the coverage you need. Then you'll go to edit and you'll be like, oh, cool, I've got a whole scene. It's not just one shot of a person throwing stuff at ducks from, like 80 feet away with a 200 millimeter lens. It's a scene with intimacy and drama. And I can build it, I can start with ducks flying and then ducks walking and then shots of bread hitting the water and then, the ducks picking out the bread. Then a shot of a kid running and the kid is like running toward the ducks, and then cut to a shot of a parent watching the kid, close up of the parent's face. They're smiling as they watch their kid, and then finally a gimbal shot rotating around the parent to show them, and the kid's like in front of them with the ducks. So you've got a way to build the scene to create emotion out of it, and now you've got a scene about parents connecting with their kids through this act of feeding ducks in what is probably a fairly unique and beautiful location in the place that you're traveling to. So, yeah, that's filming strangers and trying not to piss them off and trying to also get a full scene out of it. And that's a skill from reality TV, because when I was shooting reality TV, I never knew if I was going to get another moment with my subject. So I learned to shoot out the subject. Like every opportunity I got, I would push it as far as possible. And then when I noticed the subject was getting bored, irritated, whatever, then I'd back off and be like, okay, now I'm done. That's it. Thank you very much. And then pressure's off immediately. Subject relaxes. 5 minutes later, they're cool with me again. And it's just playing that push-pull game. I made a short film, which has yet to actually see the light of day. It was called La Seine. Am I pronouncing it wrong? I don't speak French. But set in Paris. Basic arc of the storyline, boy meets girl, boy leaves town. It's basically before sunrise with a bit of my style thrown in. The crew was me. The camera was A7S, Nikon 50, Sony 24-240. We used portable voice recorders with lav mics. I don't know, I think it's gotten pretty popular to do this with phones these days. But I used a dedicated recorder for this. The reason is because phone batteries die, people get calls, there's interruptions, apps shut down. There's a lot more variables with phones.
And they don't sound great.
A lot of the time, they don't. I've used them and had satisfactory sound, but the dedicated recorders, I think, are still a notch higher. I used I don't have it written down here, but it's an old one. It's the Sony ICD SX712U, which is such a catchy name. But it's an old, the reason I got it is because you could do manual levels and you could record uncompressed, you could record waves. And I plugged, and it's got a hold switch, so there's no way to shut it off. So I would audio slate at the beginning. I would say, okay, we're recording, this is the date, it's December 1st, and it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm at B&H, and I'm recording this live stream talk. And so date, location, subject matter at the very beginning before I start recording. And then I put it in their pocket and lav them, just like I'm laved with this G3, and just leave it running for an hour at a time sometimes, and then just sync it up in post. And that's about the only time, when I'm shooting my personal projects, that's about the only way that I would use an external mic. I don't use shotgun mics because in my tests with these cameras, usually a shotgun mic on the camera is only marginally better than the in-camera sound, and their batteries die. And if you're not listening with headphones, which the A63 doesn't have, Sony, if you're not using headphones, the battery will die at some point, and you'll get no audio, and you'll keep recording for hours with no sound, and you'll go back and you'll watch your footage and be like, oh, I need to turn the sound on. Oh, there was no sound recorded. All right, now I have nothing to go with, and I have to recreate people screaming in Cantonese at a temple somehow. Yeah.
So that happened to you.
Well, I didn't. No, that's, that didn't actually happen. But that's part of the reason why I don't use external shotgun mics on my camera if I'm not going to be wearing headphones. Yeah, so with this project, I wanted to talk a little bit about directing actors, because the kind of improvisation that I do doesn't just apply to travel videos or montages or documentary. It can also apply to things that have a narrative thread to them. So the key for this little project was trying to keep the actors and actions close to reality. So I had the people playing characters that were very close to who they really were. It was supposed to be the story of boy meets girl in Paris. They're both sort of transiently living in Paris, and that was actually the case for her. And he flew in from London just for the shoot, just for a few days. So he was unfamiliar with Paris. He hadn't spent a lot of time there previously. So a lot of that was pretty real. And I used, again, some of my reality TV training here. They improvised most of the dialogue, and I shouted suggestions from behind the camera. So they'd be talking, and I'd be like, okay, now, try to take her wine glass and get a drink of it, and don't let him do that. But you're teasing, but don't let him, and make it playful, or something like that. And I would just give them little tasks while they're talking. And I would try to have them, try to keep the tension going in the way I wanted it to go with those suggestions. So there's an element in the story where there's a missing corkscrew. It was real, and we just incorporated it in the story. I'm going to play some of the short film so you can see that. And one thing to keep in mind is it was all natural light in this short film. I moved the actors to the existing light because I couldn't move like a street light, so I could move my actors instead. And if I wanted backlight, I just had to move them to the right angle where the street light was backlight illuminating them, so I get a backlit romantic kiss. No external lighting. So, and then in editing, I used voiceover and ellipses to cover for continuity issues. It'll make a little more sense when I play the video. But key here, trying to hew as close to possible to the reality at present, and then adding just enough artifice so that it becomes a narrative. So I've only used this a few times though. This is really good if you're shooting like narrative and you're doing long takes and you don't have to invert the camera and it's a little bit more planned. If you're spontaneously just running around in public and just trying to grab a wide variety of shots, this will get annoying really fast. Yeah.
Is there your particular gimbal that you use? I forgot the brand name.
Zhiyun?
Is there a reason why you like them better than some of the other gimbals that are out there?
Yeah, I've used the Came, or the Nebula 4000 originally, then I moved to the Came single, then I used the Beholder DS1, then the Beholder EC1, then the Pilotfly H2, and now this. And the reason I go for this over all the others, for this setup, remember it has to be under about 1,600 grams, the reason I use it is because it doesn't use a software called Simple BGC, which is a very difficult to use tuning software. And I don't know if I have any images of the screenshot, but maybe I can launch it.
So this has proprietary software?
It has proprietary software, and you don't have to do any PID tuning. And yeah. Well, y'all don't need to actually see the interface, but I just wanted to show you to show you how truly daunting Simple BGC is. This is how you tune your gimbal: basic, advanced, RC, service, follow, monitoring, upgrade, debug. Each of these has also more if you scroll, or some of these do, like advanced, scroll down. Each of these is a setting. I don't even know what, I've for over a year, I've been trying to learn how this works. I don't know how it works, but you have to actually mess with it to get it perfect. And even if you get it perfect for one camera and one lens, then you'll have trouble with others. But thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming by.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.